Good morning, one and all. Good morning, and welcome to once again, unfortunately, the Good Morning Walk indoors. It is absolutely tipped it down last night, and I was out there at 8 o'clock looking. Can I even dare I even bother try to wade through the field? And I had a bit of a test, and yeah, no. Absolutely not. And it looks like, as I expected, the rain does look like it is about to come sailing down as well. So that's only going to make the field even worse. So unfortunately, today we are indoors, but that does not mean that we can't have a, good morning walk indoors. So as always, welcome, and good morning, everyone, to the Good Morning Walk. Like I say, thank you for joining us, as always, on this fantastic Good Morning Walk, as always. So, good morning to Tilly the Coder, Cathal OG, good morning to you two. Cavaland, good morning, you were just passing by. Well, hello, welcome, come on by, stop on by, pull up a chair, and sit, as today, not only we will be talking about, of course, Dominic Raab's resignation letter, we're going to be going over the big kerfuffle that's going on the Teesside Freeport. Remember, whenever sort of Rishi Sunak says, is asked about sort of the benefits of Brexit, he says, look at the Teesside Freeport. Well, turns out people have been looking at the Teesside Freeport, and all does not seem to be going very well, especially if you have seen the Private Eye piece in their magazine. And this is why I wish at some point, and I know they do some digital articles, but sometimes I wish they were a digital thing. I know Ian Hislop is like, no, we shall forever be sort of paper form. But, this article, I think, because it has taken off so much, I wish they'd just digitize it, because it would be so much easier to share, because it's really important that we know that this Freeport is an absolute disaster. And we'll be going over a couple of those points that the article brought up today. But yeah, oh boy. Who knew this Freeport would be an absolute disaster? Oh, that's right. I did, because I'd been calling these Freeports an absolute nightmare since they were announced. But anyway, let's continue on. Nigel 1, hello from Belgium. Hello to you. Chatty Rat, good morning to you. Paul Martin, good morning to you. Mitchell and Boo, good morning to you. Kuthonic, good morning to you. Dave W, good morning to you. Idra Bar, good morning to you from Hamburg. The Fallen Cure, good morning to you. Pretty Bird, greetings to you as well. Larry the Cat, good morning to you. Paul Fletcher, good morning to you as well. So, excellent. Like I say, and as always, good morning to everyone. And like I say, if you do see someone in chat who we haven't say good morning, then, please do say good morning to them. PE, good morning to you as well. Scribbly, good morning to you as well. Like I say, good morning. And Patrick H, good morning to you. And yeah, let's go over something I think very interesting, and I wonder whether this will become more of a thing, because there has been a couple of economists recently saying that actually the cause of our inflation might actually be something else completely different, that it might actually be businesses responsible for the inflation. So let's have a quick gander at this, but I wonder if this is going to become more of a thing, because this does seem to be, a lot of economists are saying, about why we're having such high inflation. Oh, there we go. Hang on. Let's see if we can. There we go. So, as you can see from the title, what is profit-led inflation? But this is what a lot of economists are currently saying as to why we're facing such a big inflation problem at the moment. Now, it's profit-led inflation, but in reality, when you read about it, it seems to be more greed-led inflation. So let's find more about this. But I suspect we might be hearing more about this, because this is not the only economist that is coming out and saying this. So as you can see, developed economies have had 3 waves of inflation since the pandemic: transitory inflation for durable goods, commodity inflation, and finally, profit margin led inflation. So, this is the big thing that a lot of now we can see some of these economists saying, oh, actually, this is what we're seeing that's driving this inflation. So, profit margin led inflation is not caused by supply demand imbalance. Profit margin led inflation is when some companies spin a story that convinces customers that prices are fair when in fact they disguise the profit margin expansion. So essentially, if a company raises prices, they go, oh no, you don't understand. Inflation is really hurting our business. So we're going to have to sort of raise prices. While in the meantime, they're raking in huge profits. We've seen this in the energy market, that despite energy prices, well, skyrocketing and leading to all sorts of kinds of problems, the energy companies are recording record profits. This is why windfall taxes are a good thing. So, technically, companies are able to use these stories to reduce their customers' price elasticity. I can't even say that. Elasticity of demand. And raising the rates. Oh, and raising the rates to reduce demand will eventually squeeze the profit led margin inflation. But it is a very crude and unnecessary destructive policy approach. Convincing customers not to passively accept the price increase is potentially faster and less destructive way of reversing profit margin led inflation. And social media might have a role to play in this process. So, this isn't the only thing. If you've been listening to a couple of economists recently, this seems to be what they're driving on. This is what they're driving on. All this inflation, this is why it's happening. Yeah, exactly, Paul. Yeah, phone companies too, with inflation plus a certain percentage increase baked into the contracts. Yeah. My phone contract, I was paying 34 pounds a month. My phone contract has now gone up to 40 pounds a month. That came out of nowhere. I was quite surprised when I got that. I was like, okay. So, and the thing is, I'm probably quite lucky that I'm at the end of my contract. So I do potentially maybe have a lot of power, maybe to try and sort of try to get a better, um, at least a better price on my phone contract, or maybe try and get some more value out of that. But I'll tell you now, £40 a month for a phone contract from where it used to be about 32 is quite a lot. And the thing is, yeah, change your contract, yeah, change your provider. Well, yeah, this is it. I've been a loyal EE customer since they were Orange. Like I was an Orange boy from the very start. Because that was what they were before they were EE. They were Orange, and you all remember the Orange Wednesday, that one of the most successful advertising campaigns in the world. I'd like to point out that was an absolutely fantastic little advertising campaign. If you remember those Orange Wednesday adverts, but yeah, I've been with them for quite a while, and to be honest, you are right. This price increase has made me go, should I be staying with them? So yeah, it's something I've got to sort out, to be honest. One of the things I've actually looked at is I could go, rather than going to another Samsung Galaxy, is go to the new flip phones. I think is it a German company? The what they call the Ouias, or the Ooze, something like that, and it's like a little flip phone. They look really cool, to be honest. I'm very techy, and it's got like the the screen where there's no gap in it, even if you do fold it. So to be honest, they do look kind of cool. Yeah. Sheen Rooney, good morning to you. Yeah, up 18%. Yours is up 11. Yeah, exactly. This is what's happening to everyone, I think, from these phone providers. And I wonder if this is it. Whether it's not that they have to increase in prices, more that it's a profit-led increase. So that would be not too surprising if that turns out to be the case for that particular sort of price increase. Ben, good morning to you. But yeah, that's what I certainly seem to be, and I think a lot of economists seem to be now leaking into this fact that this whole inflation isn't sort of driven by the Ukraine war or the supply chain problems. No, this seems to be a massively profit-led price inflation, or as many of you are calling it in chat, and I think quite rightly so as well, greedflation. So yeah, I am 100% with you on this. This does absolutely seem to be greedflation when it comes to this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That Star Trek communicator vibe with a flip phone. Exactly. I always used to have a flip phone. Before I sort of went to the sort of the smartphones. I had a, what was it now? Was it a Razor? But I always loved the flip phones before I went to, the smartphone. And so it's kind of interesting to sort of be going back to that kind of phone. Oh yeah. Yes, scribbly indeed. Yeah, the future's bright, the future's orange. Yeah, they had that tagline. That was their famous tagline for quite a while. Hopefully, in America, this will not be true in 2024 regarding the orange one. I don't think so. Have you seen the attack ads on DeSantis? Like the pudding fingers attack ad that Trump's launched against DeSantis. He hasn't even announced that he's running yet. He hasn't even announced that he's running yet, and already he went to Washington D.C. to try and secure Republican backers, and apparently no one turned up. Like, he spent a fortune on trying to attract Republican senators and congressmen to try and sort of get their backing to sort of, give him the sort of the oomph to sort of run. No one turned up. Trump's already laying into him, and he hasn't even said he's going to run. If I were DeSantis, I wouldn't run. Like, if I was seriously DeSantis, because he would absolutely, by the looks of it, get absolutely destroyed. Now, if Trump wasn't running, maybe he would run, but oh boy, those attack ads that he's already run, it's already torpedoed him before he's even announced. And I don't think there are going to be too many challenges. I think there are a lot of people in the Republican Party, the way that I see it at the moment, just going to go, we're not going to run. I'm not going up against Trump. I daren't go up against Trump. I can't blame them, but someone sooner or later will have to stand up to Trump, because Trump isn't going anywhere in the Republican Party. He's not going anywhere. So, yeah, that's going to be a very, very interesting nomination process, and I think the whole stuff kicks off the latter part of this year, I think, towards the end, doesn't it? So it could be quite interesting if Trump has any challenges, because he's going to absolutely eat them alive, and then he's going to lose the next general election. I cannot see how he wins the next general election, to be honest, in America. But then again, we'll see. We'll see. But like I say, people have been wrong about that before. But like I say, Biden, to be honest, I think has been doing a pretty good job from all intents and purposes. Yeah, he's not been perfect, but he has been doing a good job. I mean, the Inflation Reduction Act and the whole stuff in there. I wish we would get something like that over here, because that massive increase in that investment into sort of green technology is something we desperately need in the UK. That, of course, the Conservatives aren't into that. So let us go over, because obviously we got the news yesterday that Dominic Raab has resigned. Now, there's a lot of talk about whether Raab had been either pushed or he jumped. So there's a lot of speculation still going on whether Raab jumped or was pushed. And I think if he jumped, he knew he wouldn't be able to stay on. I think he knew there would be so much sort of reputational damage to him, potentially damage to the Tory party, potentially damage to Sunak. And remember, Raab is sort of a Sunak ally. Oh dear. I've just seen that joke, Platonic. And then Larry. Yeah. That's yeah. Yeah. Yep. This is it. This is again one of the big things we are worried about as well. You are right there, Sean. Oh, Alexander Campbell, hello to you as well. So I think he knew he couldn't stay, because this report does lay out that there were a few claims that they couldn't substantiate, but there were two that they upheld. And even then, if you've read the report, it does at numerous times point out things that Raab would do, which if you were to do in an office environment, you would absolutely get brought up to HR by this. I mean, one of the things that he did, if someone was talking to him and he didn't like what they were saying or wanted to shut them up, rather than maybe sort of do it politely or maybe let them talk, get their point across, he would just do this. Right to their face. And that is a pretty aggressive thing to do if you think about it. That is a pretty aggressive thing to do. I mean, if someone did that to me, like while I was talking and just went like that into my face, I'd be pretty like, oh, okay. That's yeah, that's pretty aggressive. And there were a couple of things as well that were brought up by sort of Raab's behavior. But this isn't anything new. There have been a lot of talks for quite a while about Raab's behavior and how he's sort of been behaving behind the scenes. And then, of course, you've got to remember that Raab was at one point a rising star in the Conservative movement. And of course, you've got to remember, he was the prime driver behind this. Britannia Unchained. All the way back in 2012. Along, of course, with Kersey Kutang, Priti Patel, Chris Skidmore, and of course, Elizabeth Truss. So he was very much often described as, at the time, an up-and-coming, Conservative, a potential future leader of the Conservative Party, as I said in my sort of video yesterday. So his fall probably potentially be, by the sounds of it, a long time coming. And I think it's something he expected not to happen. I think he thought, as we'll go through his resignation letter, he thought he'd done nothing wrong. And of course, in this resignation letter, as you've probably seen, Raab plays the victim. This is the bully saying he was being bullied, or he didn't know he was bullying someone. So let's have a quick read through his resignation letter and go on to see what he's had to say. There we go. So, dear Prime Minister, I am writing to resign from your government following the receipt of the report arising from the inquiry led by Adam Trolley QC. I called for the inquiry and undertook to resign if it made any finding of bullying whatsoever. I believe it is important to keep my word. And like I say, there were 2 cases. And even those, he tries to dismiss them. But there are very sort of 2 cases where there were, and there were others that they couldn't substantiate. Or that they were sort of, well, we're not 100% sure whether this would be able to sort of stand up if this sort of went the distance. So a couple of them sort of, from what we at least know, some civil servants were a bit scared. So they dropped out of this and pulled back their accusations, not because they didn't think their claim had merit. They were actually worried about what the response would be from Rab if he managed to survive. So that's a very valid thought. So, it has been a privilege to serve you as Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, and of course, Lord Chancellor. And of course, we've now got a new Deputy Prime Minister. I think it's Oliver Dowden. And we've got a new Justice Secretary as well, though I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Oliver Dowden, not on my list of who I thought would be chosen, but that also does make sense in the fact that he is a long-time Sunak ally as well. So that does sort of make sense that he would sort of be chosen. Oh, 91 Leeds, good morning to you. So I am grateful to have had the opportunity to work as minister in a range of roles and departments since 2015, and to pay tribute to the many outstanding civil servants with whom I have worked. So, whilst I feel I am duty bound, and this is where it starts, whilst I feel I am duty bound to accept the outcome of the inquiry, it dismissed all but 2 of the claims levelled against me. So that's still 2 claims. That still finds you that you did bully. And while some of these claims were dismissed, some of them were dismissed because they didn't think they had the evidence to be able to substantiate them. And even then, again, if you read the report, the way that Dominic Raab was sort of acting, yeah, he would absolutely comes across that, this guy was a nightmare to work with. So, it dismisses all but 2 of these claims leveled against me. I also believe that its 2 adverse findings are flawed and set a dangerous precedent for the conduct of good government. So he's instantly going, yeah, those 2 findings, oh yeah, they're flawed. Yeah, I don't believe them. Oh, this sets a dangerous precedent for conduct of good government. So first, ministers must be able to exercise direct oversight with respect of senior officials over critical negotiations that conducted on behalf of the British public. Otherwise, the democratic and constitutional principle of the ministerial responsibility will be lost. So essentially, he's saying right there, in reality, I was just criticizing senior civil servants. These senior civil servants just couldn't take the heat. And they wanted to do things their own way. So I felt that it was my duty to criticize them. Of course, again, like I say, if you read the full report, the way that he did that, banging on the table if someone was sort of talking to sort of try and make his point and getting across is um it's a bit weird. And of course we've had a couple of anonymous civil servants come out in also the past couple of days, also with some stories about Dominic Raab as well that have surfaced in the past 24 hours as well. Like I say, good riddance to Dominic Raab. And to be honest, I think pretty much this might be the end of his career. If not, it will certainly signal a very long, long sort of position on the backbenches and not be allowed into any sort of cabinet position, junior or senior. So where are we? Government on behalf of the British people. Otherwise, there we are. So otherwise, the democratic and constitutional principle of ministerial responsibility will be lost. This was partially true during my time as Foreign Secretary in the context of the Brexit negotiations over Gibraltar when a senior diplomat breached the mandate agreed by cabinet. So that's an interesting claim because I don't think really that happened. And if you know sort of the whole Gibraltar situation, very much in almost a very similar state to Northern Ireland, in the fact that Gibraltar, its rubbish dump isn't in Gibraltar because it's too small. It's over in Spain. Now, of course, that issue has marginally been sort of taken care of, but it's still a bit of a problem. There is still a big rubbish pileup happening in Gibraltar because they are desperately to try and get these sort of bins sort of empty. But of course, they've got to cross borders now. And that technically counts as a goods being transported. So you can imagine the amount of paperwork that he's having to go on just to take rubbish across the border. And I highly suspect that I don't know if this story will ever come to light, but I highly suspect the civil servant will go, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir, but we can't do that because of this, this, and this." And then Raab probably threw a hissy fit saying, "No, you've got to do what we tell you." So that would be interesting to see more context behind what that claim would actually be. And of course, what that particular civil servant actually did in these Brexit negotiations and how this senior diplomat actually breached the mandate agreed by cabinet. Again, what was that breach? What was that? That will be interesting. I think we'll probably find that out. Maybe, who knows? Maybe we don't. We'll have to wait and see. So, second, ministers must be able to give direct critical feedback on briefings and submissions to senior officials in order to set standards and to drive the reform the public expects of us. So, once again, yes, exactly. You are a minister. You have the right to be critical of feedback and submissions. No one is saying you cannot be critical. But as we've seen in the report, the way that Raab would respond to this and give this feedback and this critical feedback was highly aggressive. So, and of course, this must be done within reasonable bounds. Mr. Trolley Mr. Trolley concluded that I have not once in 4.5 years sworn or shouted at anyone. That's not true. It's those allegations couldn't be fully substantiated, but it didn't mean that they didn't find those allegations. Let alone thrown anything or otherwise physically or intimidated anyone. That's, of course, the infamous part that apparently Dominic Raab once threw a tomato at someone. Again, I don't think they could sort of substantiate that, though I don't think they could find any further witnesses to that. But again, it doesn't surprise me because from what we know, a lot of civil servants were fearful of coming forward because if Raab somehow survived this and stayed on as a minister, they would be worried that, well, he might, start to sort of, shall we say, take vengeance upon them, and that's, well, rightly so. I think if that had happened, if those civil servants, I think, that did come forward for this inquiry, I think they would be very, very worried indeed to be still working in the same office as Dominic Raab, and what might happen to their future careers. So he didn't intimidate anyone, nor intentionally sought to belittle anyone. I'm genuinely sorry for any unintended offence or offence that officials felt as a result of the pace, standards, and challenge that I brought to the Ministry of Justice. this is exactly what Priti Patel said. If you may remember in her apology, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry that my dedication to the cause and what I believed was interpreted as was interpreted this way. This is the current get out clause they're trying to get, and this is something that Raab is going to sort of lean into in a bit. In fact, he leaned into it more in his piece he wrote. I think it was for the Times. I think, basically saying, "Oh, this has set a very dangerous precedent because all these woke, government officials can now come after us because they don't like us conservatives." Well, this is why we do not politicize the civil service, for this reason. And as I've said a couple of times, the Conservatives are now looking for new scapegoats. They are looking to go, who can we blame for our loss of, or shall we say, the non-success of our policies? Oh, it's the civil servant. We'll start blaming the civil servants because they can't blame the EU anymore, because that was, the typical subject. But there is a big pattern starting to emerge now by senior Conservatives of blaming the civil service for their failings. Because remember, the civil service only does what the ruling party tells them to do, regardless who that might be. And yeah, you are right, Catholic, they still do blame the EU. Like I say, they still haven't given that up yet. That's very true. So that is, however, what the public public expect of ministers working on their behalf. In setting the threshold for bullying so low, and this is his excuse. Oh, this threshold was just so low. Anyone could have been accused of bullying. Anyone could have been accused of bullying. The inquiry has now set a dangerous precedent. It will encourage suspicious complaints against ministers and have a chilling effect on those driving change on behalf of your governance, ultimately the British people. He's trying to attack the civil service, essentially, saying, oh no, you don't understand. They've set the bar so low that they're going to sort of start maliciously complaining against us because those sort of civil servants, they don't like the Conservatives. Bear in mind, we've only ever had Patel and really Raab, who have been sort of the big cabinet ministers, had these complaints brought against them. So, finally, I raised with you a number of improprieties that came to light during the course of this inquiry. And of course, here we are. Oh, all these things that came out and then were in the report. Oh, they're all just fabrications. This is the classic, not only very Trumpian move, but also a very, very much a Boris Johnson move, as we've seen sort of very recently. Oh, those were just all lies. That never happened. I wonder where Raab picked this up from. So, they include a systemic leaking of skewed and fabricated claims to the media in a breach of the rules of the inquiry and the Civil Service Code of Conduct, and a coercive removal by a senior official dedicated to private secretaries from my Ministry of Justice private office in October of last year. I hope that these will be independently be reviewed. I remain supportive of you and this government as when I was first introduced to you at your campaign leadership launch last July. You've proved to be a great Prime Minister. Sorry, I can't say those words with any serious any seriality there. You've proved to be a very great Prime Minister in very challenging times, and you can count on my support for the backbenchers. So that is that is Dominic Raab gone, I think, potentially for good, because I cannot see how he survives. I cannot see how he survives this. I would be shocked if he sort of manages to survive this. So, will he survive on this? I don't know. But I can't see him returning to, well, frontline politics very soon. But this does set a dangerous precedent. He is right in one regard. This sets a very dangerous precedent for government officials trying to blame civil servants for the mess that they created. And as a result, becomes a new scapegoat. And the thing is, if you start to do this to the civil service, then what happens to all those really highly experienced people who work in the civil service and go, well, I'm not going to put up with this, and then leave the civil service? That's going to have a massive, massive knock-on effect to the running and good governance. This is going to be bad. And the other thing that this is sort of tied into is you see this quite a bit of, why are sort of council leaders paid so much? Well, the thing is, if you think about this, someone who is sort of the leader of a council is pretty much fulfilling the CEO position. And it is they who help and decide the general way of how the council is sort of run on a day-to-day basis. Now, of course, you've got sort of the councillors who are elected. You've got the mayor who gets into elected position, so they have a say on sort of the direction of the council, and of course, they are then linked to sort of how this all goes. So that is sort of how these are run. But if you think about it, you've got a guy who's in a position who's like sort of the running of a local council who gets paid a fairly decent wage. It's not nothing. But if you think about it, they're at the exact same position as a CEO. And yet you want someone who is in that position to be paid a good wage. Why? Because it attracts talent. And if you get someone in a good position, this can have really good positive effects. So I will give you a prime example. Again, local politics. We're going over to Doncaster. So for those of you who may not know, Doncaster used to have an airport. And this airport was run by a group called Peel Group, who bought the land, set up the airport, and then essentially decided that actually running the airport wasn't, or at least was not going to be as profitable long term as, well, tearing down the airport and building a ton of houses on it. And this isn't the first time the Peel Group has tried this, because they did this before with no, was it Glasgow or was it Tyneside Airport? It was one of them. It might be it might be Tyneside from what I remember, or it might be Glasgow. I can't remember. It might be one of the two. And of course, this is what they've done. We've seen all the hauliers of sort of something like Wizz Air, Jet2, Ryanair all pull out of servicing flights from Doncaster Airport, which I'll tell you now is a nightmare, because I'm off to Bucharest in Romania at the end of next month. So expect some videos from there when we're there. Like I say, I'm going to be going over fulfilling my JCI presidential duties, representing the UK at the European Conference. So that will be fun. And the closest airport to get to Bucharest in a decent time frame used to be Doncaster. Now, I can go from Leeds, but the Leeds airport flight gets me in at about 8 o'clock at night. And to be honest, I don't fancy arriving in Romania, in Bucharest, in a country where I've never been to before, trying to sort of figure my way around at 8 o'clock at night. Because by the time I'm probably sort of through the airport, got my bags, it's probably going to be closer to 9 o'clock. So it's going to be an absolute nightmare if I were to get that flight. And to try and get a better flight to arrive, well, at a more decent time, I'm having to go all the way down to Heathrow, which is, again, just as annoying. But there you go. And I did look at getting the train. I actually did look at getting the train over to Bucharest. It's not impossible, but it's about a 2-day journey. So I'd have to go sort of Eurostar to Paris, Paris to, I think, Berlin. And then I'd have to go from, I think, Berlin, I think it was, then to Vienna, and then from Vienna, I'd be able to get to Romania. But all in all, I think the journey would be about 2 or 3 days in all. And it's just like, as much as I like train travel, I don't want to spend that long, to be honest, on a train, especially traveling by myself. If I was going to do something like that, I'd at least want to travel with some people, because I don't want to travel that far by myself on a train. It's just easier to get the plane over there in the case, and sort of that's where I'll be going. Like I say, we'll be seeing some stuff going on. Anyway, we've diverted now, but anyway, back to this. So what essentially happened was they have essentially made Doncaster Airport fail on purpose. And Doncaster Airport used to be Finningley Air Base, so its air runway was quite big. In fact, I think it's the only runway north of sort of Heathrow that can sort of really accommodate big planes, because this is where the Vulcan bombers used to take off from. So the runway's pretty big. In fact, you may remember at the start of the Ukrainian war, there was talk of the big cargo plane, because that was another point of advantage that Doncaster used to do. It had a lot of cargo capacity. Because it had that big runway, it could accommodate big cargo planes. And one of those big cargo planes was a big Russian one. And if you may remember, right at the beginning of the Ukrainian war, Russia tried to, essentially force a landing at the Kyiv airport. And one of those big cargo planes, that big Russian one in particular, was used in that and apparently shot down. So you can see how sort of cargo has also been potentially affected, but that was already been shut down by that point. So the cargo's also gone, but the infrastructure is all there. The airport, the buildings, it's all still there. It's just they refuse to operated as an airport because they want to essentially knock it all down and essentially build a ton of houses because it's a, like I say, it's a big airport. Like I say, it's a former military base, so it's a big patch of land, and that's the direction that they took. Now, the previous head of Doncaster Council had basically said, "This isn't on. We're not going to accept this," and they had been trying to get a compulsory purchase order. Now, of course, unfortunately, what happened during this? Well, this person retired. And the new person, and was sort of a bit of concern, was would this new uh, sort of head of the council, would they be able to, or would they have the spine to stand up to um, to Peel Group? And it looks like they have done. In fact, they've gone even further because not only are they still after a compulsory purchase order to try and get the airport, but they have also now slapped on in or around that land so that Peel Group just can't start building sort of houses on it or anything like that. They've slapped the area, basically saying you can only build on there if it is for the development of the airport. So Peel Group can't even now use the land. And if they did, they would have to face massive fines and potentially even see those buildings that they would sort of build, they would have to sort of tear them down at their own expense, unless they can sort of justify it as a use for the airport. But it's not likely. So, like I say, the saga of Doncaster Airport is continuing. I do hope that, like I say, they do get it off Peel Group and they do get the airport back up and running again. It is a shame to lose such a fantastic little airport that it was. Like I say, I've flown out of it 2 or 3 times in the past. It's a pretty good airport. And of course, for infrastructure as well, it being a big cargo airport, like I say, the next closest is over in Manchester. It's sort of, and especially, this is what things that shocked me was the fact that you have not had the Conservative MPs in there, that they have not taken up the cause of Doncaster Airport. Why? Because, well, Doncaster is a Labour council. And as we've seen before, these Conservative MPs do not want to be sort of seen aligning themselves with a Labour council. It might be a bit embarrassing for them, but hey, there you go. So that is at least hopefully going to be it is hopefully it is going to be safe. But that just goes to show you why you need good leaders at like the top of these positions. And the only reason you will really keep those people is if you have good wages for them. And I've said before, there is a big case to be made for paying local councillors. So I would hope that that would be at least a way to save that airport. I really do hope that would be a way to save the airport, but we'll see. It does look like it is going to be saved, but it does look like it's going to be a long battle, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But like I say, I hope it does. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, yeah. Take the Orient Express. Oh wait, yeah. Can't anymore from the UK. You can't even get the Disneyland Express. That's now gone as well. No. Oh, someone in Twitch chat. Why do the English have such a hard on for Kafka? And of course, Sabine. Hello, love my t-shirts. You love Kafka. Like I said, this is my Franz Kafka t-shirt I got from Prague. Like I say, it was a souvenir. I'm not really a big Franz Kafka fan. It's just they just thought it was a good t-shirt when I was in Prague, so I got one. So that's the story of why I have a Franz Kafka t-shirt. It's not the most exciting one. But anyway, on to our main story of the day. So, Rishi Sunak's now in charge. He's now the PM. But he was the driving force to try and get free ports back in the UK. Now, first of all, you might ask the question of, what is a free port? So, for those of you who don't know what a free port is, essentially think of it like this. Imagine you've got a port, and that port has all the goods coming in and going. And essentially, what would normally happen was when these goods come in, would be taken off the ship, and at that point, that's when they would be subject to tariffs, they would be subject to customs checks, etc. Now, a free port basically goes, we're going to just take the border and essentially pull it back a bit. So we're just going to pull it back a bit. We're just going to pull the pull the free port back a bit, or at least pull the border back a bit. So the idea then becomes that you have, and of course this is the classic one, that you would have potatoes that would come into this free port, and they would not be subject to a tariff. But what you could then do is you could take those potatoes, take them to a factory that is also located in that free port, and have those potatoes turned into chips or crisps or whatever potato dish you would happen to like. So then the idea then becomes that then you can then take that finished good, and then that's what you pay the tariffs on. And sometimes you would end up paying a lower tariff than you would for the original good that was brought into the free port. Now, that's the idea of free ports. But of course, it doesn't really work if, for example, you have a free trade agreement, because at that point, that's where these things start to come undone almost completely. And in fact, if you look at the history of these free ports, instead of acting as big business developments or helping to develop local economies, instead they've more acted as more of a pull for businesses. So instead of businesses sort of being developed in the local area, instead those businesses have then moved into the free port to take advantage of all the big tax breaks, to take advantage of all the tax loopholes that come with free ports. And essentially, it sort of creates a black hole, sucking all the businesses into the free port, while essentially leaving the areas outside of the free port very much desolate. So free ports have not been good. In fact, David Cameron closed the last UK free port in 2012. And these free ports were not a good idea. They did not work. They did not have any economic advantage. They have not brought economic advantage. And in fact, again, as DJ has, hello to you, by the way, has said in chat, yeah, these are very much bad things. They end up rife with crime, not only money laundering, drugs, illicit goods, you name it. These free ports tend to have very far bad consequences. So why on earth, if Rishi Sunak, why on earth is he pushing free ports? Why is he such a big admirer of free ports? Well, as you may remember, we've covered this before in our previous videos. Rishi Sunak is essentially the disciple, the protege of the guy who came up not only with free ports, but the idea of charter cities as well. And of course, this was what he was pushing for. And you've got a lot of areas looking at these free ports thinking, do we really want to have a free port? Especially now that we've got a no-deal Brexit. Or at least we don't have a no-deal Brexit, because free ports would only be good if we ended up with a no-deal Brexit. That's the only reason you would have a free port. So this push for it is because he is very much indoctrinated to this ideology that you've got to have free ports, and they are amazing, that they work, that they're so wonderful. But in reality, they're anything but. And of course, whenever Rishi Sunak is asked about the benefits of Brexit, he says, well, if you want a benefit of Brexit, just look at that magnificent Teesside Freeport. Look how fantastic it is. That, my friends, is a benefit of Brexit. And of course, this brings us to Ben Houchen, the current mayor of Teesside. And he won the first election as mayor, but not by a lot. It wasn't a big majority he won by. And to try and secure his second term as mayor, he basically has bet his entire mayoralship and even the success on it on getting this free port. So he is obsessed and has become obsessed with getting this free port up and running. And the thing is, in this desperation to try and get this done, it seems that there have been a lot of dodgy dealings, cronyship, and potentially even corruption going on this free port. And that, of course, is also not including the massive environmental disaster that this free port is currently creating, because this area used to be not only a big sort of steelworks, but also a big chemical plant works as well. So in trying to dredge up the estuary, they have in effect released a ton of chemicals into this estuary, and in effect killed off thousands of prawns, crabs, fish, all down this estuary, and has ruined the livelihoods of any fishermen who use that estuary to fish those particular species. It has been an absolute environmental disaster. But of course, Houchen and co say that the free port has nothing to do with this environmental disaster. Yet suspiciously, all this environmental stuff started happening the second they started dredging. Bit of a coincidence? I don't think so. So, Houchen has been desperate for this. Now, as I said before, this article, or at least this story, or the uncovering of this story, has come from Private Eye. And Private Eye has been focusing massively on the free port and the ongoings there, because it has been dodgy. There has been no transparency about this free port from the get-go. So after today's show, if you want to go and hear a bit more about this, I would absolutely recommend going over to the Private Eye website and having a look at page 94, which is sort of their podcast. It's called, it's episode 90, it's episode 76. It's titled North and South, but it is very, very good. It tells you what we're going to go over today, but it's by the main sort of reporter, Richard Brooks, who's been sort of talking over this about some of these very dodgy dealings that have been going on there. Needless to say, the reporting from the Private Eye and by Richard Brooks has been absolutely fantastic. They have been absolutely spot on about this. And I hope that they do continue to dig, because this looks like this would be a massive scandal. Not only would this potentially torpedo Ben Houchen, but this potentially has the implication this could tie up Rishi Sunak at some points potentially as well. So I'm just going to quickly overgo what is an overview of this podcast, because like I say, like I say, you should go and have a check of it yourself if you want to sort of go check it out. But I'm just going to quickly sort of go over this because, like I say, there's some really dodgy stuff going on up there in Teesside, and it doesn't sound good. So, to be able to start building this free port, they created with public money a sort of public owned company called the Tees Valley Trust, I think it was. And this was the public owned company that would sort of own the land. It bought it with like the compulsory purchase order. They own the land. This was going to be fantastic. However, what happened was that we have seen some land developers, and this is what they sort of mentioned in the podcast. They apparently bought a key piece of land on this site. And this gave them massive leverage over the Freeport. And from what we know, is that they were very rapidly running out of money to try and build and develop this Freeside Freeport by Ben Houchen. It wasn't attracting the businesses. There was the big problem where a Saudi Arabian company pulled out of investing in the Freeport. So they've been having a lot of money troubles. But now you have these developers who have owned this free key piece of land that have a massive leverage point over the development on this. And what they essentially did, and we don't know what leverage that leverage was, but they did a deal with Houchen that they then would own 50% of what is essentially a publicly run company. So these three land developers essentially got this 50% deal and are now massively profiting from whatever money that the Tees work was making. And the thing is, on there is an absolute ton of scrap metal. So they started to get this scrap metal while also using their 50% share to try and get prime parcel pieces of land, because the idea was that they could look at a piece of land, they would then buy it, and they could then lease it out. Now, the thing is, from what we know here, there's been some very dodgy dealings going on, but it gets even worse because remember, they already own 50%. And remember, the Tees Valley, this whole port idea had been rapidly running out of money. Ben Houchen had been running out of money for it. He staked his entire mayoralship on trying to get this up and running. So what does he do? He's rapidly running out of money. These property developers basically, by all accounts, seem to have him by the short and curlies. So what does Ben Houchen do? He gives them a further 40% share, meaning that these property developers now own 90% of what was a public company. Why? How? We don't know. we have no idea. But it gets even worse because there are even more dodgy side dealings going on. Because you may remember we said that free ports have become often become big areas of concern for drugs and other illicit schemes by criminals as well. Well, guess what? The security contract, the people who are going to be responsible for monitoring the security and actually in charge of the checks going on at the Freeport, was given to a group, or a security company whose boss had been caught up in one of the North's biggest drug trafficking stings. They've got that contract. that is going to be an absolute disaster. We can already see the headlines coming of what's going to happen there. Oh, Jem, good morning to you. And it gets even more funnier because the sons of these property developers, who, bear in mind, at the time of this, I think they were about 20 years old, started magically their own companies of plant hire, meaning generators, tractors, whatever. And these companies that their sons own have now been hired or used to hire out this equipment to sort of get the steel to start, building works on the plants. And yet, these property developers, as we'll see in a moment, oh yeah, there's nothing dodgy going on here. So, in the light of all these allegations, and like I say, I definitely recommend this. By the way, that if you want to find out more about this,
tips for that yet, but there are a lot of topics I do know about.
Alexa, quiet. Thank you. Oh, I don't know why, but yeah. Anyway, definitely go to the Private Eye website and look up this page 94. Like I say, it's on their front page at the moment. If you scroll down and you check this out, has a lot of this information. Definitely worth a listen. If you can pick up last Wednesday's edition of the Private Eye, big story in there about all this. Like I say, I would love to go over it, but like I say, it's not online because Ian Hislop is determined to sort of make the Eye sort of succeed in a paper form, and like I say, he's been doing very well, so I won't sort of diminish him from that. So yeah, definitely go and listen to this if you want sort of more information going on. But this, I think, has the potential to become a massive, massive scandal, and so too do agree the Yorkshire Post, because the Yorkshire Post have been also looking at what's going on at the Teesside port. So after all this was published, after all this furore opened up on social media, well then they started now to have a look at it. So it's good that we've got the Yorkshire Post now also looking into this as well. So as you can see here, Teesside Freeport developers deny these corruption allegations and say that they have nothing to hide. So, two property developers involved in the redevelopment project of the Teesside Freeport zone have denied the claim that they are profiting from corruption and said that they have nothing to hide. So, Andy McDowell, the Labour MP for Middlesbrough, claimed a truly shocking industrial scale corruption is now linked to the Teesside project. And needs to be investigated when he spoke to the House of Commons just this week. He highlighted the documents which show the taxpayer is spending millions on decontaminating the Teesworks site. But the developers, Chris Musgrave and Martin Corney, have been handed a 90% share stake in the company called Teesworks Limited, which has options to buy valuable parcels of land, remediated land, or for nominal fees, even lease them to investors. So they stand to make massive amounts of money over this, and this needs to be definitely investigated. So while there is no public record of the two developers directly investing money into the project, led by the Tees Valley Mayor, Tory Mayor Ben Houchin, they are due to earn millions of pounds from the lease of these agreements and the sale of scrap metal from the site. A Tees spokesperson said that developers deny any wrongdoing and that Mr. McDonald's is looking to, quote, destroy the project to advance his own political ambitions. I don't think so. I think these are absolutely need to be looked into. And if they've got nothing to hide, well, then you should welcome a open investigation into this, guys, right? You should be welcoming such an open investigation. So the Tees work does aim to try and transform around 4,500 acres of disused industrial land on the banks of the River Tees into a manufacturing hub that will create thousands of jobs to generate billions of pounds for the local economy. The publicly run South Teesside Development Corporation is spending millions of pounds of taxpayers' money on clearing the industrial waste from the site to decontaminating it. Estimates do suggest that it costs at least £120,000 per acre. The decontamination work has already been completed on at least a 90-acre plot of the land on the bank of the River Tees, which will then be rented to SEAW Wind so that it can build a £450 million wind turbine monopile manufacturing facility, which, again, I've got no problem with if they want to do that. But the big problem is it's being built in a free port. And I think this free port is it might not be sort of the best place to sort of build such a facility. So a HM land registry transfer document obtained by the private eye shows that the freeholder for the site was sold to the Teesside Limited for just £96, £96 and 79 pence plus VAT in December of 2022 by the STZ's subsidiary company, the South Tees Development Limited. And according to the private eye, an investor will pay Tees Works Limited around £70 million to £80 million up front so it can sublet the land to the STC's parent company, the Tees Valley Combined Authority, which will then itself rent the land to the SAAH Wind for £4.3 million a year. So already this seems to be a lot of subletting going on here. It does seem to be some very, very, very dubious, dodgy business dealings going on here, and it does seem really dodgy that this is going on with public money and public funds being able to do this. There needs to be a lot more transparency going on here, but of course they have tried very much to say, "Oh, there's nothing dodgy going on here." Well, evidence suggests otherwise. So Mr. McDonald said, the only economic growth that is being delivered to the accounts of Ben Houchen's pals, Mussers, Mesgrave and Corney, who, for a bargain of £100, will benefit to the tune of £100 million, all while the state remains on the hook for the ongoing environmental costs. The Tees work spokesman said that Mr. McDowell should contact the police if he believes there is evidence of corruption. Mussers, Mesgrave and Corney would be willing to assist any investigative process as they have nothing to hide, he said. Well, this is why he's calling for an open, independent investigation to what's going on here, because there doesn't seem to have been a lot of transparency going on here. So I definitely think he should go to the police, because it does seem to be a lot of dodgy stuff going on here, but it needs to be brought to light. This is why there needs to be an open and open investigation about this, because they're not being, I think, as transparent as they are sort of claiming to be. It is one thing to question the professional judgment of Ben Houchen, his professional officers, independent legal advisors, and the boards of the STDC and the TVCA, all whom have been involved in every key decision. But it is something else to question the integrity of individuals involved in the process and suggest criminal conduct. Well, if you think he's wrong, prove him wrong. Show that you do have nothing to hide. Show why these contracts were done. Show why these people were given a 90% share in this. How did they end up getting it? What went on? There's a lot of questions that need to be asked about this and should be asked about this. So he said any wrongdoing would require a conspiracy of such magnitude that dozens of people from multiple organizations would have to be involved. Again, they're saying, oh, it's just a conspiracy. It's just a conspiracy. There's nothing going on here. Well, if there's nothing going on, then you have no problem with a public inquiry into all this, right? He added, the true facts are already within the public domain, but are ignored by our critics. Well, what is the truth about this? Who is the most part are resentful and bitter at the prospect of the Tees work being successful. Here's the thing. Freeports have shown over the time that they are not successful. But Ben Houchin has bet his entire political career on this, and there is a lot of money to be made, as you can see from this. Just the steel and scrap alone on the site is worth tens of millions of pounds. So it is not a thing of they don't want it to be successful, because history shows that Freeports aren't successful. It's the fact that there is a lot of dodgy stuff, a lot of dodgy dealings ongoing, and if there is nothing going on as you claim, then you should have no problem in showing that all of this is just a misunderstanding, because after all, if you've got nothing to hide, open the books. Open the books. Show you've got nothing to hide. Show all the emails and the conversations that have happened. After all, if you've got nothing to hide, you'd have no problem showing it. So over the coming days, we will explain the facts again to remind the public of the process that had been made on the Tees works over the last 3 years. So again, you're showing the quote progress, but you're not really showing how all that quote progress came about and how all these contracts went, what went on behind the curtains, because that's what seems to be going on. There is a massive lack of transparency going on here. And the fact that their defenders, their public spokesperson have come out and said, oh, this is just a big conspiracy. They're just ignored at the facts. They are just annoyed that the prospect of this, the Freeport of being a success. Well, okay, open your books, show what's going on. Show that all this transparency and what's going on here isn't true. So, yeah, something very, very dodgy going on at the Teesside Freeport. And I think this is maybe the first of a lot of series of stuff that I think is going to come out about this. Because it's already increasingly dodgy from the beginning, and it's only seemed to have gotten worse over time. So the redevelopment is part of the Tees Valley Freeport Zone, where businesses will enjoy tax breaks and lower tariffs. It has already received over 300 million of government funding and loans. The Tees Works Limited was set up in 2019, and the STDC owned half of the company until December of 2021, when the share transfer took place, and the developers now own 90% of this, which is, again, should be very much looked into. Mr. Musgrave and Mr. Corney and the TVAZ chief executive, Julie Gaspili, are currently listed as directors of the company. Mr. Houchin said that he has worked with Tees Limited, which was set up with the approval of various government departments and local authorities to secure more than £2 billion of investment in recent years. The BP Exploration Operating Company Limited is expected to sign an agreement with the Tees Works Limited so it can build a gas-fired power plant and a carbon capture facility on a 100-acre plot of land as part of a £1.5 billion project. The STV, which now reveals, and bear in mind, you do not need a Freeport to be able to do this. Like, you do not need a Freeport to be able to do this. There are a ton of different, very transparent, very legal things the government could do to encourage the building and the development of these factories and these things. But this Freeport, doesn't really look like it's going to be that good. So, the SDZ has not revealed how much Teesworks Limited will make from the lease of the agreements with the HSE Wind and BP, but the company receives at least half of the money made through scrap metal sales. And by July of last year, 63 million pounds had been made by selling 205 million tons of scrap metal of one assessment commissioned by the Tees Valley Combined Authority, had found that it could be more than 370,000 tonnes on the site. But before the redevelopment begins, the SDC secured a compulsory purchase order in 2020 to acquire at least 1,000 acres of land, which has become home to SSI Steel, and making the plant until the company went into liquidation in 2015 and was owned by 3 banks in Thailand. The CPO inquiry was told that in November of 2019, Musgrave and Corney's company, the DCS Limited, signed a 3-year lease for a 70-acre plot of land on this site for about £400,000. The inquiry was told that Mr. Musgrave had then made an unsolicited offer to the Thai banks for all the land back in December of 2019. So, again, there's something dodgy going on here. Something very, very dodgy going on here. Something incredibly dodgy going on here. That's for sure. And as history shows, these free ports never end well. And remember the fact that the company that owns the security for this site and will be responsible for the checks, I think, one of their people involved in the company was arrested for being in charge of one of the biggest drug smuggling stings in the north. So, I wonder how careful they're going to be checking certain shipments and not checking some others. It's it's really not looking good for this plan, but I think there's now going to be a lot more scrutiny of this site. I think there's going to be a lot more scrutiny. I think a lot more journalists are now going to start looking at what's going on here on the Tees Valley site. I know certainly it seems like the Yorkshire Post is going to do. The Eye has been constantly looking at what's been going on from this free port from the start. So they're going to continue looking into this. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's yet more stuff to come, not only from the private eye, but potentially now other journalists who are going to start looking at this site and trying to find out what's going on. And like I say, if you want to find out more about this, definitely head on over to the Private Eye website and check out their podcast. Page 94, North and South. Like I say, it's on there. If you go to their their main sort of website page and scroll down to the bottom, there it is at the moment. So definitely go give that a listen. It explains a lot more of the stuff that's going on Teesside and what was uncovered. And if you are lucky enough to live near a newsagent that happens to stock a current copy of the Private Eye, I would go out and grab yourself a copy of it and find out more. As I said, it doesn't look good. It really does not look good. What is happening at there? It seems to be a lot of massive money making, a massive profit going on there. And it would not surprise me if this was the first to start going on. And I would echo, by the way, to the developers, if you really are sure, and you are claiming that this is just a conspiracy, that this is just a plot to make it unsuccessful, then, well, first of all, welcome a public investigation. Say, yeah, sure. If you want a public investigation, go on, have one, because we are so confident nothing is going on here. Then, second of all, open the books. Open the books. Let's see where all this money is going toing and throwing from. Open the books. Let journalists have a look at it. If there's nothing going on, let journalists have a look, because as you'll find out if you listen to this, when the guy who was broke this story went up to have a look at the books, as he was allowed to do, because like I say, this is public money and you're allowed to go, can I have a look at the books? Sure. Instead of being shown the books, he was taken on a tour around the site. So he didn't even get to see the books. They tried to distract him with a tour of the site. So, and then show the communications that's been going on in and around the Tees Valley site and what's been going on here. Because it really does not seem, it does seem there seems to be a massive lack of transparency going on here. And if this does end up being a failure, well, hey, the responsibility's on you guys. If there is nothing wrong and this is just a big conspiracy theory, open the books, open it up to journalists, let them have a look. If there is nothing going on, let this information be out there. Let them have a look at all this. But I don't think that's going to happen. And I think this is just the first, probably potentially of many stories to come about the dodgy dealings going on this Teesside Freeport. And certainly, I would hope that in a future election for their regional mayor, people will realise, and certainly I would hope that the Labour candidate would say, well, look, if the government doesn't want to have one, we're going to have one, and make that a focus point of the campaign, that something has been going on, that Houchin has been doing something incredibly dodgy. Something is not right with this Freeport, and it needs to be looked at. So, as always, thank you very much for joining us today on today's, good morning walk indoors. Like I say, unfortunately, the weather sort of put us off today. Like I say, the field is an absolute sort of muddy nightmare. And I really didn't want to sort of face it. And of course, the weather has improved a bit now. But as always, have an absolutely cracking weekend, everyone. Go out, enjoy yourselves, have fun. And as always, if you can't be safe, be sensible. Enjoy yourselves. Remember to hit the like and share button as well. There's links down below for the Patreon page, the Pony Club, the Buy Me Coffee link where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, all that stuff. So as always, guys, thank you very much for joining me. And of course, we'll see you all next weekend for another Good Morning Walk. And of course, watch out for more videos coming out as well for this week as well. And of course, until then, we'll see you all next time.